Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Full disclosure, boys and girls, sometimes I get a little bogged down in the work, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with, once more, as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down and talk with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do because you're listening right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I say this a lot, but it's true, it's the most important, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because if we're writing about it and talking about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this one, it's a good one, and I will fully admit this one is my bad, a little behind the eight ball on this one. But we're talking about a documentary, a real fascinating documentary, which is out in the world now for some with some theatrical coverage in the States. It's the cinematic racing documentary called Rookie Season from director Adrian Bonvento. And really what this film does, it forgoes sort of the traditional talking head kind of stuff, and it literally kind of straps us into the seat during these racing seasons, and we see sort of the violence and the sort of intensity that these drivers go through on a weekly basis. It's an amazing thing as it follows Rebel Rock Racing during their inaugural IMSA season, and it really shows what it takes to compete at a certain level. It's a real fascinating look, and I think it's one of the better driving documentaries that's out there right now, or racing documentaries, as it were. But we had the unique pleasure of sitting down and talking with Adrian about the origin of the story, how he pulled off some of the amazing shots that got pulled off, because it's a film. When you're watching it, it's intense. I think intense is probably the best way to put it. But if you're not anywhere where this is playing theatrically, I know it's going to be around on video on demand on digital on April 4th as well. So I do recommend checking it out that way. But first, enjoy our talk with Adrian, because it's a good one. And again, Rookie Season, go check it out if you're a racing fan, because it is a hell of a film.
Well, I mean, first off, I want to say thank you for the time today, man. I appreciate this.
Yeah, no, of course. I want to thank you as well. It's all good. I'm on the road currently. I got a couple days off. Down at Daytona filming for
Cool.
For the 24-hour coming up. So we were here for the test for the past couple of days, and then the main event starts Thursday through Sunday.
Oh wow. Okay, fair enough. But congratulations on the film, man. It's a hell of a watch, man. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. Just if only because, like, obviously there've been other documentaries that have tackled the subject of racing, but there's never been one that kind of put us in the car, which you did. Now, I guess my question for you is, like, walk me through not just the initial idea for the film, but how you pitched it, because I can imagine a lot of these guys, especially when you're doing something like this, basically don't want you to be in the way. Like, how did you convince them you wouldn't be in the way?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I got a lot of no's. I approached a lot of teams, and a lot of people either didn't have the budget, didn't really understand the concept of it. Didn't think it would fit with the team until I got the one yes from Rebel Rock Racing, which is really the only one that mattered. It wasn't easy to get the film, started. I thought it would be, but it was pretty tough. To answer your question about moving around, getting in the way, things like that. Fortunately, I've been filming motorsports for the past 5 to 7 years, a couple of years just as a fan, kind of on an amateur level, and like 5+ years professionally as my full-time job. So I kind of know my way around the paddock. I know my way around the teams, the trailers, and I know where to be, where not to be in the way. And I think that was one of the key factors that really helped the film succeed, because when you're in the pit lane, these pit boxes, I mean, they're real tight. And these guys are operating under pressure, and every second matters. So if you get in the way and someone's trying to change a tire and you're blocking someone, or you get your leg wrapped up in a hose or something like that, like it can be pretty bad pretty quick. So I think my ability, or my familiarity with the track and the way racing goes really helped for me to stay clear of those errors and get those shots that you needed to get.
So I guess my question is really like, how did you pitch it? Because I mean, you're not necessarily doing one about the race or doing one about the sport in general. You're really focusing on this team. And I mean, I can imagine, especially in the heat of the moment down there in the pit, there's moments they don't necessarily want on camera.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing too, and I'll get to that in a second. The moments that they don't want on camera, but I pitched it I knew Robin Liddell for a number of years. Him and I had worked together on previous projects, and he introduced me to Frank, who's the team owner and co-driver with Robin. And I kind of have a certain style I like to film, which is not necessarily focusing on the race results or what happened or you know, how the tires were that day, or what the temperatures were, or all the statistics and things that, you know, after that weekend are largely irrelevant. I always found myself as a filmmaker wanting to ask simpler but really far-reaching questions, such as the one that really this film centers around, is like, what is it to race? And I mean, it seems like a very simple question on its surface, but it's really complex. And we're talking about asking yourself why like 5 or 6 or 7 times till you get down to the core building block of the real driving reason that these people do what they do. Because you could do something else, you could do anything else. It's not an easy lifestyle on the road constantly. And I've always been fascinated with what, you know, drives people, no pun intended, to do what they do. And Robin has always given great, you know, insight. And because of that relationship, he was able to sort of break down a lot of those barriers that race car drivers and sports, you know, professionals as a whole tend to have when you're on a broadcast camera, where they kind of thank the sponsors, thank the, you know, hi to the family at home, and all that stuff. But that's the opposite of what I wanted, which ties back into what we talked about before, which is that moments that a lot of teams might not want you to film. And that was a conversation I had with Robin and Frank before we even began the project. I said, look, I need complete access for this to work. I want to film the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there was a variety of which, you know, that found its way into the film. And they were on board with that. So it was a bit tough to navigate at first, especially with some of the crew members who I didn't know. But once they saw that I wasn't there to sort of, you know, do any sort of smear campaign, and I was really making a cool artistic film, they got on board, and they largely just tried to forget that I was there. And I think that's one of the big selling points of the film.
Well, and I mean, I think that gets summed up in a line that really stood out for me. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but I mean, I think the line was like, when you're in the car for a 4-hour race, it's not quote unquote fun. It's stressful. It's hard. But the film really does show sort of the competitive nature. And I mean, for you putting this together, because I mean, layman people will look at race car driving. They're going around in a circle, or they're going around in a track, but it's much more complex than that. How important was it for you to really show, at least what I found, sort of the complexities of the sport?
Yeah, I mean, very, very important. I mean, I think that there are 2 types of people who would watch this film. One is obviously your motorsport fan who's going to have a base level of knowledge in racing. And I think for those people, there's a lot of cool Easter eggs and a lot of cool things that I've done with the camera that haven't traditionally been done in motorsport documentaries. Number one of which, feeling like you're in the car. So the key decision I made in terms of the video in the car was to not use any broadcast cameras, to not use any existing in-car footage that's kind of low quality and low res. So I had, 4 or 5 cameras in the car at all times, hardwired into the car's power supply so they wouldn't shut off, plus separate audio recording to really give you that high quality sound, because this car does sound so good, and the audio really puts you in the seat. So for your race fans, I think that they're going to be, even for your not race fans, they're going to see what it really feels like to be in these cars. And then, I'm sorry, I wandered a bit, lost track of the original question.
No, you've been answering. No, you've been doing good.
But then for your, I guess the part A of that question is the other type of person who might watch this film is your non-race fan. And for those type of people, I wanted to convey certain elements of the sport, and certain elements of the complexity of it, certain elements of the strategy, the tightness of the competition, the physical exertion, the mental challenge it is. And I wanted to do that without sort of dumbing it down to an extent and having this be like racing 101.
Right.
So that was a challenge throughout the process. And I consulted with a few different people, both on the team and some people I knew who, don't have a motorsport background. And I tried to find that sweet spot between how much information do we give so that your average person who doesn't understand racing isn't completely lost, but your true racing fan will still have a lot of tidbits in there that they find interesting and new and compelling.
Well, and I mean, that's just it. The film was compelling. And I mean, it's of the moment. You could feel sort of the tension and the electricity throughout it. And I mean, I think for me, just as a casual viewer, seeing a film like this made the sport that much more, salient, relevant. Like it almost made it tactile. Whereas films in the past, be it about, Schumacher or Senna or some of the personalities that may have been around the sport, have been historical. I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, why hasn't the sport of racing had more films about sort of the currentness of it all, as opposed to sort of the history thereof?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about something that's more historical, you already know what you're getting. Like the Senna documentary, which I thought was a great film. It's all happened. So you're just sorting through existing footage and repackaging it, and you already know he's charismatic. You already know he's an incredible driver. You already know the races he won, the races he lost. All that kind of stuff. And a lot of times, I think that from a filmmaking perspective, it's easy to look back and sort of glorify things that especially if someone's no longer with us, like Senna, and it takes on a different relevance. I've always found it interesting. I started in photography and worked my way into filmmaking. And when I was doing photography, I always found it interesting that certain photos might take on such relevance. Like say there's a photo of Jimi Hendrix when he first got his start in some bar that nobody knew about, but the photo itself isn't great. And I was like, but people pay so much money for this photo, or it's relevant, or it's rare, or it's sought after. And I'm like, the actual artistic quality of it isn't there. But the fact that it's about someone before he became famous, for example, who now is like an icon, makes the picture. So obviously my film doesn't have a Lewis Hamilton. It doesn't have a Senna. It's not about Formula One. It's about sports car racing, which is not the pinnacle of the sport. However, I find it incredibly challenging and interesting. So not only did I have to approach it from, without that as sort of a crutch, so to speak, but I mean, I don't even see it as a crutch. Like I said before, I always wanted to delve deeper into those questions, which I feel that even a lot of historical racing docs don't necessarily answer. And that's really what drives these people. Why do they do this? It's not an easy question to answer, like I mentioned before. And that I think is why this film succeeds in a way. I think that it's going to maintain its relevance for some time to come, because it's not necessarily just about the results, and it's not about what happened this race or what happened that race. It's really a case study about people, sports as a whole, competitors as a whole, why people are driven to do what they do as a whole. And that was what I always really wanted to accomplish.
Is that how you craft something like this? Because I mean, I've got to imagine when you're working sort of in sports or in racing or whatnot, there has to be sort of a singular focus on the moment, because like if you're there, you have to track the moment because you don't want to miss the moment. You can't ask them to make the moment again, kind of thing. But does the moment focusing on the moment cause you to sort of lose perspective on the bigger picture, or do you sort of have that bigger picture going in and then you're trying to fill it with moments?
I mean, that's a really good question. The big picture was always in my head throughout the whole process, from the time it took me to plan the film through, filming it and editing it and everything else like that. That was always there. Obviously, it's a documentary and not just a creative film where you can you still are recording events that did happen. So it was a challenge because I'm not sure if I mentioned, I'm not sure if you know, but I was the guy, right? There was no crew. I shot everything. I ran around with my run and gun setup that I like so much. I rigged all the cameras in the car, all the audio in the car, and the tracks can be big. They can be 4+ miles around. So there were certain times where I'm, 2 miles away from the pit lane. I'm tuned into the team radio. And I realized all of a sudden there's something about to happen that I need to get back to. So I'm sprinting with all my gear, 2 miles back to the pits to get there in time. So part of that was, again, having been at the racetrack for a number of years, full time and as a fan, really helps you kind of hopefully estimate what's going to happen when, or you kind of know where you need to be when, or what there's a percentage chance that this might happen. So you kind of hang around that spot. So thankfully there wasn't really anything I missed, believe it or not, over the course of the season. But I think that's in large part due to my familiarity with the sport and my familiarity with how the team operates, being, tied into the radio, and all those things. And then the bigger picture stuff that was more about, why do you do this? That a lot of that came actually in sit down interviews with Robin and Frank, in hotel rooms away from the track when there was less stress and there was more time to just talk and kind of let those barriers down and really get to thinking about those bigger questions. And some of the visual shots, just in practice sessions or free time before the race, when you don't have to be running around documenting everything that happens, that's when I think I tried to capture some more creative and artistic shots. Sometimes something just happens and you see it and you react. So I think it was kind of a combination of planning, just gut feelings, where to be and when, and combined with some calm, contemplative interviews outside of the track.
And, I think your familiarity with the sport definitely shows on the screen too, and it gives it that energy. Because, if you had been in a truck with, 83 GoPros set up all around the track, it would have felt like a different film. But, you're there and it feels, like I said before, it feels very tactile almost. And I'm kind of curious, have you had a chance, how have the guys thought, have they had a chance to see the film sort of outside of that pressure cooker of the moment and see what you put together?
Yeah, they all have, and they all love it. The feedback I've gotten on the film has been, so rewarding. That's one of the reasons I love doing film is sharing my creations with people. And so, yeah, I've given previews, obviously under the radar, to guys in the team. We did some little private screenings, and they loved it. They've been watching it over and over and over and wanted to share it with family and friends and everything. But I said, we got to wait for the bigger release. But yeah, the tactile nature of it, I think I also really focused on, not only just the in-car setup, which really gives you that high quality, visual and audio that you don't normally get when you watch the sport on TV. But also that's part of my setup. I don't like to run to the track with, a big cinema rig with all this extra equipment and an easy rig or a tripod or this. I just think it gets in the way.
Yeah.
I like to be mobile. I shot everything handheld. And I think that really gives you that tactile sensation, especially when you're in the pits and you're really moving around, and it's kind of it's like you crank up, the shutter speed a little bit, and it's kind of like Saving Private Ryan, where you're just what's happening next, and I really like that style of filming. And I think that helps convey the pressure, and the energy that's in the pit lane, especially when these guys are doing these stops under pressure. Yeah.
Is there anything about shooting racing or even shooting in the sports world as a documentary filmmaker that people on the outside looking in wouldn't necessarily expect? Is there any sort of a hurdles you have to jump through kind of thing?
Let's see. You mean as a filmmaker trying to get into motorsport, if they weren't used to filming motorsport, what might be a hurdle for them? Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think, the biggest thing that I can think of, we talked about before, is just knowing the sport, right? Because it's very different. There's a lot of safety stuff. First of all, you have to know, because everybody's here to compete, and there's a lot of people who just come up to the track, and you'd be surprised. Some photographers who have come to the track the first time damn near walk onto the track during a race, and I'm just amazed. You never think that would happen, but it does. You go to all the photo meetings and the safety briefings. They're like, hey, you never think we had to tell some this, but here's a live video feed of some photographer walking onto a track during the race to get a shot, and he's never coming back again. So safety, I think, is one of the big things. These cars are moving fast, and everybody's in a big headset. Everybody's moving under pressure. Even just walking around pit lane, you got to always have your head on a swivel and be careful. And something else we already touched on, I think, the knowing what's going to happen when, unless you have a team that you can position in multiple places. If you're just a team of one or a team of few, if you don't know the sport, it's hard to predict what's going to happen when. You don't know when people are going to make their pit stops. You don't necessarily know what to react to strategy wise, if the rain's coming in and things like that. There's some legal hoops to jump through, rights you have to clear. All the footage has to be licensed usually, depending on the event. If it's a closed circuit like these events, like the IMSA racing series, they technically own all the footage and then you license it from them.
Right.
That's something. So that's not the easiest thing to do. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, probably just knowing the sport and knowing how the guys are, getting in with the mechanics and the team and just becoming friendly with them really, really goes a long way. And then in terms of the in-car placements, that has been years of trial and error with me. What looks good, what doesn't, what's going to vibrate so much that the footage is unusable, what may be again, go back to safety, what may be a safe mount. You don't, God forbid, one of these GoPros comes off during a 2.5-hour race and it's bouncing around in the car and that causes some issue or distracts the driver and he crashes the car. So things like that I've learned a lot over the years. I've luckily never had an incident like that, but even down to in terms of the GoPro placements, I mean, just stuff like that is not. I guess for me it's intuitive, but I talked to some filmmakers who are getting into the sport and they've asked me questions over the years and they've a lot of the things have been the in-car placements, where to place it, what settings on the camera to use. We had issues with the Chevrolet because it's a front engine car. It gets extremely hot in the car, especially running during the spring and the summer when it's warm. I mean, the metal in the car will literally burn you to the touch if you hold your finger there for more than a second. So I had issues for half of this film where the GoPros would just be overheating and shutting off. So we had to work with the mechanics we had like NASA material to try and bounce the heat back off. It didn't work. We had it plugged into the battery of the car so that it would run for longer. That didn't work. And I finally figured out, that you need it in a place where there's natural air circulation coming in, because the cameras would run fine for the first, 40, 50, 60 minutes. And they come in for their first pit stop and everything's just burning hot.
Right.
And the car would stop and all that hot air would just stay there and accumulate. And the GoPros would just be like, oh my God. And they just shut off. And so that happened a few times and that was real nerve wracking. But thankfully it wasn't during times when there was footage that I really needed to have. And the more, all the moments I needed to capture during the season, my positioning worked out and the GoPros didn't fail me. So knock on wood for that one.
No, I mean, I'm curious. This is a bit of a silly question, but I got to ask, are there movies like for you as a artist and a storyteller, like what were the movies or what were the moments that sort of clicked in your head that kind of made you want to get into this business?
I don't know if they're necessarily, I'm a bit different. I feel like I just kind of do what I like to do. And I don't really, other than Senna, which is an amazing documentary, I don't have too many motorsport documentaries that I am like drawing inspiration from or that I watch too much or really can mention off the top of my head. I mean, maybe that's part of the reason I really wanted to do something on my own, because I had a vision for it. And I've always been a fan since I was 5 years old. My dad took me to like the racetrack when I was real young. And I remember hearing a Porsche just squeal out of the pits. I mean, smoking tires, a rev limiter, just like smell of gasoline. And I was just hooked. So I've always had, I feel like, my own personal vision on the sport, which ties into a lot of those questions like, why do you do that I like to ask and approach. So I just wanted to do my own thing. I just really wanted to do my own thing. And simple as that. And
you know what, man, I think it's a beautiful thing because this film really does stand out as almost sort of a fresh, like, I don't want to say it's an entry into a canon, but it's kind of building its own canon when it comes to motorsports documentary filmmaking, because it's a hell of a ride. And man, you've done some great work. And just, as you've proven in our talk, man, research. I mean, for independent filmmaking, that seems to be a big key these days. But thank you for doing the work and thanks for the time, man. This is a lot of fun and good luck on your shoot in the next few days.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad it came to fruition, and I'm hoping that it can give motorsports fans something new than what's currently available, and non-motorsport fans. I'm hoping that it can really draw them in and show them that there is so much to get excited about when it comes to cars and motor racing.
I think it's going to do that and then some, man. Thanks again for the time. This was fun.
Thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.